Hi there, Catherine Mattice. I am the conference chair this year, 2022, for the International Association on Workplace Bullying and Harassment. The conference is in San Diego in September of this year. It's never been in the US, so I'm super excited to be the chair to bring it to the US. I have a star in the industry of our world of workplace bullying with me today. Ståle, let me go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm Ståle Einarsen. I'm from Norway. I'm a psychologist by training and an academic, and I'm a professor of work in organizational psychology at the University of Bergen on the western coast of Norway. And I've been there for 30 years and been doing bullying and harassment research since then.
Yes, you are one of the main forces in the research around these topics, and also one of the creators of this conference. So you were instrumental in creating this and the association. What motivated you to do that? And do we even still need to have something like this? Haven't we solved all these problems?
Well, the more we know, the more questions we get. Well, in the beginning, workplace harassment and bullying wasn't on the agenda, and wasn't on the agenda for the bigger conferences. So that was a reason we needed to meet up. We needed to discuss. We needed to share experiences, research, and so on. And also, this is a very particular conference because it's multinational, international, truly. Mm-hmm. But more than that, it's also multidisciplinary. Mm-hmm. So you would have sociologists, medical people, organizational behavior people, organizational psychologists, legal people. And in other conferences, they tend to be within your discipline, mm-hmm. which meant that most people would go to conferences where they would meet just a handful of people. Mm-hmm. And then it's also a research practitioner conference, which also makes it very, very special. So this is a place for practitioners and researchers to meet and to share experiences and result and to update each other. And that was a big need, especially in, let's say, go back about some small 20 years. So it really had a mission of spreading the news, spreading our research, and also motivating people, because most people were back at home in their own university, in their own business, in their own country, more or less alone in the beginning. Mm-hmm. So they needed to meet people who would agree this is actually an issue, is actually an important issue, and it's actually something that we should care about, and there are actually knowledge out there.
Yes, and you come from a part of the world where this has been getting talked about for a long time. I know when I started Civility Partners in 2009, and I would call HR associations, can I come and talk about workplace bullying? And they're like, I don't know what that is. That's not a thing. And it was this process of watching America open up to the idea that there is other types of harassment. There's equal opportunity harassment and bullying. And it's been neat to see that change. But I know we're pretty far behind over here in America from other countries. And I know you're a big part of that. Talk to me about how has the research evolved over time? What are some of the big things you've learned over all of these years of doing this?
Well, I think it's gone through a couple of phases, I think. And these phases seems to be the same in all the countries, but yet at the different time points. So the first phase is characterized by, well, does it exist? And if it exists, does it have any consequences? So that is kind of the first phase of getting it up on the agenda. And for that reason, we often need, on the practitioner side, you need these kind of horrible cases that would hit the media and would take attention. On the research side, you would need studies of prevalence, studies of consequences, health outcomes, and consequences for businesses and so on. Now, the next phase, then we start looking, well, why is this happening? And that phase is characterized by data that shows us that, well, this is linked to the organization or to the working environment, at least. So it has something to do with the nature of work, how you have organized work, the design of work, how you manage work. So this is an issue for an employer, because even after the first phase, employers will still say, well, people are people and humans are humans, and they mix up stuff and they get into problems, and it has nothing to do with organization. So the second phase is about, okay, it is actually connected to at least the work environment. Now the third phase, then we start to think about, well, what is the organization's role in this as an organization and as an employer? That's where we are at the moment, looking at things like the ethical infrastructure of the organization, the climate for conflict management, what is called the psychosocial safety climate, the role of upper management, and so on. So now we kind of moved away from, not away from, and in addition to looking at the local working environment and the local organization of work, we tend to look at how is the organization set up to handle, to prevent, and to handle these kinds of things, and what is the organizational culture in this.
It's been, oh, go ahead. I thought I interrupted you. I've been working on the conference agenda today in between these podcasts, and there's a lot of exciting presentations about how to solve this problem, or at least minimize it. And it's so fascinating to see all the different options and things that people are doing out there. And I'm always honored to be there as a practitioner and share what I know just from my experiences and how it compares to the academic research. I'm curious, I get this question all the time, so I'll ask you, has the pandemic increased workplace bullying, or how has it changed workplace bullying?
We don't know. Easy answer to this is that we don't know. We have some data where we have followed a large manufacturing in industrial organization through the whole pandemic. We happen to have data 2 weeks before everything closed down, and we follow them over 1.5 years. Rates haven't changed. But what may happen is what we do think, and now is what we think, and it is, of course, in the first phase, especially in those industries where people work from offices and so on, and they started to work at home, that may make a relief in the beginning. You're kind of getting away from the toxic environment and so on. But then you have to go back again, and then also all the troubles that may arise after being kind of remote working, not being part of the daily fabric anymore, and also we know that role ambiguity and role conflicts and so on is a very highly, perhaps the most important predictor of this in the work environment. That is, of course, something which may develop out of if you are a long time outside your organization. But of course, there's another force in this for those who still have to be actually at work. Yeah, and we know from a lot of research over a long time that when groups meet external enemies, they tend to actually improve their internal affairs. This was an external enemy. Something is out there, and that may tend to, in the short run, to reduce internal conflicts in the short run. So the answer is, we don't know.
That is interesting. I hadn't thought about that it might bring people together, and their conflict might dissipate for a while as they get focused on fighting the good fight against COVID and everything going on in our world. When I've been asked that question, I've been saying, I think it's possible it has increased bullying, but of course we don't know, just because of the risk factors that it's like they're all brewing together at one time: high stress, burnout at the beginning when there were layoffs, competition for keeping your job, and all of that. So it'll be interesting to see how the research unfolds in the following years around this.
It will.
Now, you've been researching this for a long time. What are you focusing on these days? And you'll be at the conference presenting. So tell us what you've been working on.
Yeah, we've been working on a lot of stuff. I got a huge scholarship in 2016. So I've been a team of 15 working for me since 2016. So we just had a and a viva, a disputation, a public defense of a PhD. That's what we have in Norway, we have a public defenses. So it goes on for hours. It's like Martin Luther, who met in Heidelberg to discuss his protested assumptions and so on. So we have just that. So we had that yesterday, and that was a PhD that looked at the role of laissez-faire leadership. So meaning situations where there are leaders in the name, but not actually taking part of the game. So what we looked at, what Kendall looked at in many different research designs and in shorter period of times and over long period of times, and that is, well, let's have all these risk factors that we know are out there. So work pressure, role conflict, role ambiguity, and interpersonal conflicts. Okay, we know that they are risk factors, but how are they affected by the behavior of your immediate leader? And then it turned out that all these risk factors were there, they are there, but they disappear as soon as you have a local manager who are not laissez-faire. It doesn't seem that they have to be so fantastic, as long as they're not bad, or as long as they're actually doing something. So it is the avoidance of leadership in situations where there are in need of leadership because of stress due to different sources. So the interesting thing was that the risk that we've been looking for 30 years and that we know are there, it disappeared. It wasn't there. So if you have a leader who is managing conflicts, who are present when needed, who does focus on troubles when they arise, and does not avoid the responsibility, avoid any of the conflicts, then all these well-known risk factors doesn't seem to have an effect.
Interesting.
Then we have another PhD, which is also coming up quite soon. And there we looked at this new concept of conflict climate or conflict management climate. And there we see the same thing. In teams, in organizations, among employees who have a perception of that the organization handles interpersonal conflicts well. So they think we have the proper procedures in place. I have managers who are able and competent in doing this. I know how to act if I ever come in this kind of situation. And if they have this perception of a well-developed climate for conflict management, then again, all risk factors disappear, just go away. They don't have any effect anymore. So this is interesting because some of the things that we have looking now in hindsight, that some of the, going back to interventions and so on, some of these things we have looked at work environment qualities and work design and so on. They are quite distal factors. So if you have a work environment where the work organization actually is designed to create conflicts and ambiguity and role conflicts and so on, but will still have to be something have to happen between that and actual cases of workplace bullying. So they are quite distal.
Right.
But this is a very proximal factor. This is very close to when it happens. It also seems that if you work in this kind of climate, if you happen still to be exposed, it doesn't affect you in the same manner. So the effect becomes smaller or less detrimental, and the risk factors, they go away. So these are among many things that we are working on at the moment. And also next week, I will have another public defense on another PhD coming up. And this one has looked at, well, we know that workplace bullying is highly related to mental health problems, psychosomatic problems, musculoskeletal problems. So that is a fact that we know. And these people really, they develop severe health problems. Then our idea was, well, if that is the case, then we should find a large proportion of them in the mental health care system. So if you go to a clinic which is designed to help people with anxiety and depression and kind of moderate or common moderate mental health complaints, then they should be overrepresented in these clinics.
Right.
So we went into a clinic in Norway who had about 600, 700 patients per year. And so we started a project there. And first of all, we were, well, are they there?
Mhm.
And how large proportion of your patients at an ordinary mental health clinic would actually have these kinds of experiences? And the clinic didn't know offhand. So about 25, 26% had that. So 1/4 of all patients at the clinic, they had experiences with bullying and harassment in the workplace.
Yeah.
Now the next thing was, well, how do they compare to other patients? Well, they were much worse off. So they had a much higher symptomology. That is, they had their level of depression, anxiety symptoms were much higher. They were much more. Many of them were already on sick leave or in danger of long-term sick leave. And they had higher proportion of them was already out in sick leave. Their self-confidence of kind of getting back to work was much lower. So this was a group that was worse off than the average patient.
Wow.
And then the next question was, of course, well, can we treat them? Will they benefit from an ordinary procedure, or would they need special clinics? Well, we had a clinic for 5 years here in Bergen, which focused on workplace bullying, and that worked well, but for budget reasons, it was closed down. So now we looked at, well, can we treat them in an ordinary clinic? That would be the best thing, of course. And the results are very, very optimistic and very, very positive. But there's always a but.
Yes.
But the but is that they don't return to work as easily as other patients.
Mm.
So the treatment will help them with their mental health problems. And some of them will return to work, to workplace or getting a new employment. But the tendency is that happens to a much lesser degree than with ordinary mental health patients. And this is a clinic that focuses on return to work.
Okay.
Yeah, so it is a mental health clinic designed for common mental disorders, moderate disorders, with the aim of keeping you in work or returning you to work. So,
are they not returning because of some internal resistance they're feeling about going back to work, or is it more related to just where they're at with their mental health is really keeping them from returning?
Yeah, well, I think it seems to be a bit of both, because we also looked at what we call as return to work self-efficacy. So to what extent do you actually believe that you are able to return? And they were worse off in that respect. And even if the treatment worked, they were still borderline for the cutoff of the likelihood that you were able to return yourself. And then again, of course, many of them would then return to the same kind of bullying harassment situation.
Right.
And they also differ from other patients. Other patients, the ordinary patients, they either would like to go for a disability pension and be out of working life, or they wanted to return to their old work. This group had a much higher tendency to say, well, I want to go to work, but not where I was. I want to go somewhere else. And then the question is, are you able to find that employment? Are you able to do that? But the mental health problems were definitely, if not healed, at least improved a lot.
Wow. Well, this is fascinating stuff. This is very fascinating. I appreciate the time. So all 3 of those PhDs will be at the conference presenting, or you'll be there presenting this information?
I will be there presenting some other research that we've done.
Okay.
Because we have also looked at a project instead of doing interventions, which is very difficult.
Right.
And it's also very difficult to measure effect of interventions. That is the problem with intervention research. It is so difficult in practice.
Right.
So we have done that, but instead of, or on top of that, couldn't we just look at what organizations are naturally doing, and then see if there's a relationship between what organizations are doing or not doing, and let's say the prevalence rate of workplace bullying. I will look at different kinds of methods, of addressing the problem and how that is related to the prevalence of workplace bullying. And we have looked at all municipalities in Norway. They are not that many, they are 400, but still we have been inside 75% of these organizations and looked at what kind of system, what kind of ethical infrastructure do you have, what kind of systems do we have, what kind of policies do you have, how do you address these kind of issues, and how is that related to your prevalence rates of workplace bullying.
Yeah. You're so full of information. I feel like we could just chat forever. Can we just keep talking? Well, thank you so much, Ståle. I really appreciate your time. And so looking forward to seeing you in person in San Diego, you and all of the listeners of our little show here today. And just super excited. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you. My pleasure. Looking forward to it. Extremely. Yes.
Thank you.